We start with the United States, where the US President Donald Trump accuses China of violating a recently signed trade deal. In a fiery post on his Truth Social platform, Trump claimed his fast deal saved China from economic collapse, including factory shutdowns and civil unrest. But he says China is back to business as usual as broke the agreement. Trump warned that despite his efforts to avoid further damage, he's done being, quote, Mr. Nice Guy. This comes after just weeks after both countries agreed to a temporary tariff ease. The agreement has reached levies on imports from both sides, but now Trump claims Beijing has failed to hold up its end of the bargain. US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has also confirmed trade talks with China are a bit stalled and may require direct talks between Trump and Xi Jinping. Wall Street opened today lower after Trump's statements on China. Meanwhile, a US federal appeals court has temporarily reinstated Trump's sweeping tariffs. This comes just a day after a lower court ruled he overstepped his authority. The Court of International Trade had declared the duties unconstitutional, saying only Congress can impose tariffs. Trump criticized the ruling as horrible and accused judges of weakening presidential power. He said on his Truth Social that the decision, if upheld, would, quote, destroy the presidency. In response, the White House is considering a Plan B under Section 122 of the Trade Act, which allows 15% tariffs for 150 days, a more defensible legal option. This uncertainty has also given the EU leverage in trade talks with the US, with EU officials maintaining they won't compromise on digital taxes or food standards. For now, the tariffs remain in place, but with court challenges underway. We're now joined by our guest today to discuss this in more detail. Peter Cordillo joins us to discuss this. Peter, this is after China and the US agreed. We thought that they had agreed to a deal, right? And we thought this whole tariff farce was over. Do you think President Donald Trump is restarting the trade war? And if so, why, after he saw so much fallout previously?
Well, to begin with, the trade war never ended. And obviously, it was a temporary deal that China signed with the United States after he lowered the tariffs from a real huge number and got it down to that 40% level. So it really wasn't the end of the trade war, or was it the end of the agreement? It was just a temporary agreement so that they could move forward. Obviously, according to President Trump, China violated the temporary agreement, and as a result of that, there'll probably be retaliation on the part of the United States, and so that just means that the negotiations are going to have to restart at probably at higher levels, and of course, Treasury Benson alluded to that, saying that maybe Mr. Trump and Mr. Xi would have to get involved and discuss and negotiate some sort of a deal. And I think that probably will happen, but it's going to take time.
Yes, and Peter, with all this legal back and forth going on in the American judiciary, does the US still have enough leverage to pressure China, do you think?
Well, I think it does, but I also think that China has enough leverage to make sure that they get what they want, and vice versa. And I think it's not only China. I think a lot of the other industrial nations as well. Let's not forget that reciprocal tariffs, will be set to restart in July, and so that means that negotiations will probably begin and could uh, indicate that you're not going to see anything until perhaps the end of the summer. So it's going to take time, I think. And this one day on, one day off, unfortunately, I think is buying time. But eventually there will be deals.
Peter, this Section 122 has been floated for a safer legal option. Do you think that will give the markets more clarity, the American consumer more clarity? Do you expect more stabilization if that happens?
You'll probably see a little bit more stabilization, but I think the key is what's the inflationary impact from any tariffs agreements, and how much do the tariffs shave off of global GDP growth and China growth and the United States growth. So again, it's a big question mark. And let me just throw this out there. For instance, today we had good news on the inflation front, an index that the Fed looks at very carefully and takes it very seriously, the PCE price index. And we saw that inflation, top line inflation, on a month-to-month basis was up 0.1%. The core rate the same way. But the key to this report was the fact that on a year-to-year top line inflation moved to 2.1%. Well, that's just 0.1% away from the Fed target. Now, if this trade war would not be overlapsing the economic picture, most likely there could have been at least one rate cut beginning in June. And of course, we know that that's not going to happen in June. And so we need, the Fed and the markets need clarification on the trade war. That's just as simple as that. And what the impacts of inflation will be for the Feds. And that will determine whether or not the global economy stays afloat, whether or not China winds up in recession, whether or not the United States winds up in recession.
Peter, it's been a good while now since Donald Trump stood in that White House Rose Garden and held up that big board. How are Americans now feeling about these tariffs? Obviously, this 90-day pause in the tariffs is going to creep up on us. What are their thoughts? How do you think that this is all going to play out? Obviously, we can't speculate, and one cannot predict Donald Trump's actions. But how are the American people feeling about the economic policy of Donald Trump right now?
Well, let's put it this way. If you look at some of the macro indicators that suggest that, for instance, we saw spending, which was on the weak side. We got the final University of Michigan sentiment report out today, and it was up, but it was up not that much. Although we saw consumers' confidence rise from the ashes, you might say, but yet still in negative territory. So it simply indicates that the consumers are worried and they're not opening up their pocketbooks. And if you look at personal income, that was very strong. So income has not come down, right, which is a good thing. And that ordinarily means that you would have stronger consumer spending. But it's not happening because of the uncertainties. I would say that the American people are weighing all factors, and that they are hoping that there will be a quick resolution to this trade war, and that at the end it will be prosperous for everyone.
Peter Cordillo, thank you very much for your insight and joining us on the programme. We stay in the United States for our next